This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. And Notturno Home Services, Greg's home comfort company. If you're looking for a team that puts your comfort first, visit notturnohome.com/Bedard for 10% off your next service. You could save up to $1,000. The big boy is back from Mobile, Alabama. Oh, Alabama. I will get to a bone that I have to pick with Greg that I've been waiting. I've been waiting days. I've been waiting days to go after Greg. I
could feel it. I could feel it down in Alabama. I could feel your angst.
I tweeted at you, by the way, when you were asking for questions, and I asked if you missed me. You never got back to me.
I did on the pod. I said no, but I said no, but you and I will be beefing soon enough as soon as I get back.
I watched the pod. I must have missed that part. I must have just didn't hear it.
It was right at the end.
Oh, that's why.
I think. Yeah.
I thought you were wrapping up. There was like 50 seconds left, and I said, okay, they're done. And I shut it down. So I missed that part. All right, fair enough. But we will get to it. We'll get to Greg, who is all of a sudden siding with Felger and Maz. We'll get to that a little bit later. But first, let's start with the news of the morning, Greg. Ben McAdoo staying. Are you surprised by that?
Yes and no. I think, and I was just looking this up, I think that Ben is he's done everything, but I remember, when I covered him with the Packers, he was a tight ends coach for a while, for like 6 years. So as far as I know, you probably are up on this more than I am. They do have an opening at tight ends coach. I could see him sliding in there. The way Mike Vrabel, and we'll get into this, the way Mike Vrabel is putting together that offensive staff, it's not surprising. In one respect, to me personally, is it somewhat surprising? Yes, but we will get into that. It's part of the discussion that we're going to get into a little bit later.
Yes, it is. By the way, Thomas Brown has tight ends coach to his title. So I don't think McAdoo will be doing that job, but he will be doing something. And we should bring up the fact that, McAdoo, I know a lot of people will look at this last year's team and say Alex Van Pelt's quarterbacks and T.C. McCartney quarterbacks. But I believe it was, I hope I get this right, somebody did a great job. I don't know if it was Doug Kite or Mark Daniels, but one of those guys wrote a story during the year, the later portion of the year, about Ben McAdoo and what his role was. It was actually McAdoo who was working with Milton every day. T.C. McCartney and Van Pelt had May and Brissett to work with. Milton was kind of tucked off to the side with McAdoo on a daily basis. So if anybody out there is super excited about Milton, and we'll get to him in a minute, but if anybody's out there super excited about what they saw from Joe Milton, a lot of that credit actually should go to McAdoo and not necessarily Van Pelt, because that was kind of his pet project in 2024.
I am pretty sure it was Mark Daniels. So I wanted to make sure we give him credit. And then also, I think Mark reported at the time that Ben ran some meeting on Thursday. I don't know if it was third downs. I think it was third downs or red zone. But that was, Milton and whatever he discussed on Thursday was sort of his primary responsibilities.
Yeah, he helped game plan situationally, and he ran the scout team defense, I believe, on Thursday practices as well. So that's what McAdoo did, if any of you were wondering last year. I don't know if you have any more thoughts. I did hear you and Giardi, the last few podcasts you guys did this week down there in Mobile. I know you touched on it a little bit. Pellegrino, Brian Belichick, both gone. Any more thoughts on that? Do you think this is a critical mistake? Do you think it's a mistake? How do you feel about Vrabel and how he's replacing these guys? You've got a number of people. You've got Booker coming in. You've got Richardson II coming in. Justin Hamilton was just reportedly hired yesterday. How do you think this defensive backfield kind of shakes out with these new coaches?
I'm fine with it, because look, it's Vrabel's defense. they're going to be running, and he wants his people. And so I'm all good with that. I mean, I do think that Pellegrino and Brian Belichick did a really good job when they were here, especially Pellegrino. A little bit harder to tell with Brian Belichick. I thought Pellegrino, the entire time he was here, did a really nice job with his cornerbacks. I thought, not only did he get high-end guys like Stephon Gilmore and Christian Gonzalez to play at a good level, but, whether it was Jonathan Jones or Marcus Jones, or developing a guy like Alex Austin, who, went from, he looked completely lost when he first got here to, being a legit NFL player. I think that's all a credit to, Mike Pellegrino. And I thought he did a really good job. And look, it's, I don't love it for him, because I'm more of the, if you do a good job, like, you should be able to earn your way, or, have a real opportunity to be on the, to continue on the staff,
right?
Especially for continuity for the players. From what I understand, he didn't really, he and I assume Brian Belichick were in the same bucket. They didn't get a real opportunity to stay on the staff. So I don't love that, but that's from 10,000 feet. I mean, again, it's Vrabel, it's Vrabel's defense. From what I understand, they might be going to more of quarters coverage than predominantly man. We'll have to see how that develops, and whether that indeed develops. Maybe that's not Pellegrino's forte, but I'm all for coaches. And again, this is going to be part of our discussion that's coming up. I'm all for coaches picking guys who know how to run their stuff. And so I don't have any big complaint about it.
We're going to break a record for teases towards a later segment. Quarters is interesting, because I wonder how you handle Christian Gonzalez if you're going away from man coverage as much as they played this past year. To me, it's like, lean in on Gonzo, let him do what he does. We'll see how this all unfolds. Obviously, we've got plenty of time. Pellegrino, to me, was really good, and I thought he did an excellent job. So many guys. I mean, just so many guys. Miles Bryant and Jonathan Jones and J.C. Jackson and Jack Jones, if he could get his head straight, Marcus Jones, Alex Austin the last couple of years. So many guys that he either took and improved, like Jonathan Jones, or developed like pretty much all of those other guys I just mentioned. I thought he did a tremendous job, and I was disappointed to see him go. I really was. It was the first staff move. Him and Brian Belichick, that was the first two staff moves that I've seen that just kind of left me disappointed, and I disagreed. I thought they should have kept those guys on the staff. But look, I'm not saying that Vrabel can't replace them. I'm not saying they're irreplaceable. I get it. It's just I thought those guys did a good job, especially Pellegrino. And if I had it my way, I would have liked to see those guys stay here, especially Mike. Joe Milton, interesting name. I know Brian Baldinger came out, kind of threw Joe Milton's name into the ether. You also mentioned it on the podcast with Giardi yesterday. You also mentioned it at BSJ. Greg has a great write-up, by the way, at BSJ if you want to check that out. But it sounds like Joe Milton, he might be available, Greg. Is this more a case of the Patriots pushing this and saying maybe we should look into this, or is this because teams have already started to contact the Patriots about possibly moving Milton?
So from what I understand, and it's interesting because I got this guy, of course, Twitter being Twitter, coming at me and being like, they're open to listening, or they could be open to listening, which is the way I think I termed it. And he's like, that's a nothing burger from Bedard. Like, look, if I wanted to be a flamethrower and I cared about, social interactions and, whatever clicks, then I would put like Joe Milton is on the trade block. Like, no, people know by now, like I'm going to give you as accurate as I know it to be at the time. And from what I heard, there's been some internal discussions, and it's sort of gone outside of internal and I don't think people are calling right now. I think there have been calls, at some point in time. Again, there's been a regime change. They're still going through that. There's a lot of evaluations going on. So, but from what I understand, I think the Patriots now, as they're getting towards the end of that process, are now contemplating listening to offers on Joe Milton from this perspective, that they think the timing might be right for that, given Milton's film in the final game of the season, which was really impressive, and that this is a weak quarterback draft. And, they drafted him in the 6th round. If you can get a good pop on it, maybe you just do it again, trade him, and then do it again with somebody else. And so, I think I would guess that they're going to start listening, because, if you look at it, the 3rd round quarterback evaluations, like if you're talking like Riley Leonard or Dylan Gabriel or whoever, like, would you rather draft those guys or go with Joe Milton, who has all the physical skills that you want: size, running ability, arm strength, and now you have NFL film, against, some of the Bills backups, but still it's NFL film. It's better than the college film. Or would you rather use your 3rd round pick on to trade to the Patriots for a Joe Milton? So I think if the Patriots could get like a 3rd round pick, and perhaps it goes up, but at least a 3rd round pick to go from 6th to 3rd, that's a great return on investment. And I think you have to entertain that.
Tell you what, I'm a Notre Dame football fan. I'd take Joe Milton over Leonard. I'll answer that question for you. So it'll be interesting to see what they can get. And by the way, if Greg was going to be a flamethrower, he'd go on Felger and Maz and talk about forced marriages. We'll get to that later on. The last thing I wanted to touch here quickly, we got more stuff to talk about, especially the front office. But a lot of people asking me, I'm sure a lot of people are asking you, Greg, what's going on with the wide receivers coach? Why haven't we heard anything about a wide receivers coach? Do you have any information as to why we have not heard anything regarding that position on the coaching staff?
No, I have nothing. I was down in Mobile trying to find out. I was stalking Mike Vrabel with my powerful binoculars from across the stadium as he talked to various people, and it looked like he was conducting some interviews there. He was not. I did not spot him at Thursday's practice. I didn't spot Elliott Wolf as well. I could just be missing them. Vrabel's kind of hard to miss. Wolf is easy to miss. But, perhaps I wouldn't be surprised if they were conducting some interviews on that. But yeah, I mean, that's the next big hire to go down.
Sean Jefferson, by the way, staying with the Jets. That was reported this morning. I know some people were wondering if Sean Jefferson was a possibility here. He's staying in New York. I do wonder, Greg, if this is a situation where they're waiting for somebody or trying to get somebody out of a contract. I know when I was seeing all the video from Vrabel and down there in Mobile, and he's talking to Kevin Stefanski, I couldn't help but wonder if he was trying to pry Chad O'Shea away from Stefanski. So I wonder if there's some of that where they're trying to get somebody, but that somebody's under contract and they're trying to wiggle that guy free. Or like you said, it might just be they're going through a bunch of interviews and they don't have as much urgency as we thought they would filling that position just yet. All right, before we get into the front office dynamics down there in Mobile, Greg wants to tell you all about our friends at PrizePicks.
PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long at PrizePicks. I can't wait for the big game coming up so I can sit down, make all my PrizePicks, which you will hear next week, and then rooting for them during the Super Bowl. It's playoff time, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action. With PrizePicks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. PrizePicks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinion into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
So the Patriots had a contingent down there in Mobile, and I know you talked about this during the week with Mike on the podcast. You had Matt Groh, you had Elliott Wolf, you had Ryan Cowden, you had Vrabel. Am I missing anybody? Was Alonzo Highsmith down there?
He was not with the group. He was mostly hanging out with a lot of former Packers and Browns colleagues in one end zone, keeping a close eye on the offensive linemen, the one-on-ones. So Alonzo Highsmith was there. Yeah.
The one thing I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but the one thing I wanted to bring up here to start is I don't know if we appreciate, or at least appreciated, how far behind the 8 ball the front office was last year. And this is not to excuse Elliott Wolf. Okay. It's not to excuse all the decisions that he made or the decisions that he did not make. I want to make that clear. We always have to do that, the caveat. So people, if it gets aggregated or people are getting mad, this is not to excuse Elliott Wolf and everything he did in the last 365 days. But I do think, the fact that Wolf and Mayo did not even make the trip, Greg, last year to Mobile, and this idea that, Wolf was working on trying to hire the staff with Mayo, and you had turnover, right? I mean, you had Wolf bringing in Highsmith, you had Belichick leaving, you had them working on the new grading system that they did not install and actually use last year, but there was so much going on. Did we underappreciate that in real time about how much of a mess it was?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care about Mayo, as far as him being down there. But that Elliott Wolf, your de facto general manager, isn't at the Senior Bowl. It's not great. And I think it did, it started the ball rolling on them sort of being behind the 8 ball last year. Wolf had to hang back and help Gerard Mayo with staffing. And so, I think Elliott was thankful to be back in his element at the Senior Bowl, doing his thing, freed up where, he doesn't really have to, worry about staffing or anything like that. Vrabel knows what he's doing. He has all these guys around him, whether it's, Cowden or John Stryker or, any of those guys. So I think he's thankful to be back in his element and doing the job the way that he always thought he would do it.
It's just a reminder of we don't know what we don't know. And certain things are reported out, and we can go off of what we're watching, right, and what we hear and what we read. But the people behind the closed doors know exactly what's going on. So, again, I get people being frustrated. They should be frustrated about some of the things that Wolf did over the last year. He certainly did not pass the tests necessarily, but if you're Robert Kraft and you're Jonathan Kraft, and we heard that the Krafts were making phone calls throughout the year of like, how should this program be run? And they knew what was going on. And they probably sat there and, said to themselves, well, did Elliott Wolf really have the opportunity? Did he have the opportunity to wrap his arms around the job? Is this the part where we say goodbye to him, or we look at it and say, we gave him Gerard Mayo. Mayo had no network. He's doing Gerard Mayo's job in some cases. You got Robin Glazer thrown in there, not making decisions, okay? But Robin Glazer's in there during the interview process. It was just a cluster bleep. And I think, Robert looking at that and saying, I don't want to fire Elliott. When you start to put all these pieces together, I don't think that's outrageous. And I don't think Wolf, obviously, we've talked about this, Greg. I don't think Wolf is making these decisions. This is going to be Vrabel and Cowden. And we'll talk about that in a minute as far as their dynamics down there in Mobile. But I just think it does kind of open your eyes, at least it did to me, of going back and saying, man, he didn't even go down to Mobile. He wasn't at the GM meetings. Like this dude wasn't doing the basics that a GM is supposed to do because he was having to deal with other stuff. And I think the Krafts probably took some guilt on that and said, we put him, like they said, they put Mayo in a bad spot. But they also put Wolf in a bad spot. And they probably said, we think this guy's smart. He's got the resume. We've seen him do some good things. Let's just hold on to him and let's see how Mike feels about him. And I think that's kind of where they landed. As far as the dynamics in Mobile, Greg, I know you mentioned Matt Groh. I don't know why. Every time I see Matt Groh, I think of Napoleon Dynamite. I apologize, Matt. But I saw this one picture. And it was Cowden, Vrabel, and Wolf to the left. And I think it was Cam Williams and somebody else with computers in front of them to the right. and sitting in the seats was Matt Groh all by himself. Does that pretty much tell us what's going on here?
It seems like it. Now, I will preface this by saying, like, basically anybody you talk to about the Patriots and their dynamics, they're basically like, Matt Groh is a interesting guy, and a sort of an odd guy. I wouldn't say like interpersonal skills are high on his asset list. Not that that's damning or anything like that. I mean, just look at freaking Bill Belichick, for crying out loud. But it just seems like, from observing them and also talking to people that were around the Patriots at the East-West Shrine game as well, it just seems that like Matt Groh's like on the periphery, that he's not as intimately involved as he used to be. And like you see this dynamic happen when organizations bring in new people, and it just feels like that. And again, I don't know anything, but just from observing them, it seems like Matt Groh is one of those guys who will be on through the draft, and then we'll quietly hear about him, leaving the organization.
Yeah, Burt Breer recently, in this past week, said something along the same lines, where he could see being gone eventually. It's somewhat, it's somewhat like high school, when you see some of this stuff. There are little cliques that get built, right? And so, looking at that picture, it was like the junior high kid who didn't have any friends, sitting at the table by himself, having his peanut butter and jelly sandwich with his lunchbox. Like I felt bad for Matt Groh in that moment, because he did look like the kid that wasn't allowed to play with the other kids, which was a rough picture for him. I'm sure he'll be fine. Belichick will grab him. He'll be put in some role for UNC and make six figures. I think he'll be good. I wanted to ask you about Stretch, John Stryker, because we haven't really dove into him as much as I think we could. What have you heard about Stretch, his personality, maybe his role, his impact? Tell us about that guy.
So I got to meet him in Mobile.
How tall is he, by the way? Is he taller than you?
He's freaking tall. Like, it was hard the way our interaction. I will say he's tall and long. You see why he got the nickname Stretch, because
right.
Yeah. But seems he's very nice. Very very smart. Enjoyed my interaction with him, and look forward to more. What struck me, because you hear about him, and talking to people in Tennessee, talked about like he was more of Vrabel's administrative assistant, but with game day duties, and I guess that holds up. Basically, how I would describe him on like what I think. This is just my feeling. Like, he didn't tell me this or anything like that, but it seems like he's basically Bears Nigerian, who is Belichick's right-hand man and sort of gatekeeper, but also like Ernie Adams. Like he's a mix of both. So he's basically Vrabel's gatekeeper, and then he's also very smart. Will be up in the booth, game day, game management, all that stuff. So definitely, interesting, interesting job description, and look forward to seeing him in action.
Have you ever seen Bussing with the Boys, or I should say Bussin' with the Boys? Taylor Lewan, Will Compton?
No. I mean, I know of them, and I've seen maybe clips, but
do yourself a favor. And anybody who's watching this podcast or listening, go to YouTube and search Bussin' with the Boys, Mike Vrabel. He did an episode with them in his final year in 2023. I think it was right before the Titans went to camp. And it tells you a lot. It's for any Patriots fan who wants to know Mike Vrabel at a level that you might not know him. And if you want to know how he runs, especially the first year, because some of the talk, because Will Compton and Taylor Lewan were both with Vrabel in 2018, his first year with the Titans. And they go through how tough Vrabel was his first year with that team. And I find that fascinating, and how he changed and how he evolved as a coach, where he might have been a little bit more hard-ass that first year. And he talks about weeding certain people out. So if you're a Patriots fan and you want to have a feel for how Mike Vrabel will handle this roster this year in that locker room, I would suggest you go to Bussin' with the Boys and watch that episode. It's fantastic. Vrabel's absolutely hilarious, by the way. He's really, really funny. I know people say it all the time, but in this episode, you could really get a feel for it. But I bring that up because he talked about stretch, and they talked about that 2019 game against the Patriots, where Vrabel, as we all know, we all remember, Vrabel got the best of Belichick with the intentional penalties and wasting clock, and they get into stretch, and Vrabel is over the top as far as how much this guy means to him, to the operation, and says how smart he is, and gives him a lot of the credit for the strategy stuff that we see from Vrabel, and says, he's brilliant. And Vrabel did mention that as Belichick was losing his mind, Vrabel was smirking, not necessarily because he was smirking at Belichick, but he was smirking because apparently he said Stretch was losing his mind in the headset because he had known the rules and Stretch was helping Vrabel get through this. And so Stretch was like throwing a parade because he was seeing Belichick's reaction and he knew they got the best of him. So I guess he was, I would guess screaming expletives and losing his mind. And that's why Vrabel was kind of smirking, because he was trying not to laugh to what Stretch was doing in the headset. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess, and Taylor Lewan also speaks very highly of him. So does Compton. I guess, Stretch is a very vital piece of the puzzle for Mike Vrabel. So I think he's a guy that we do not want to overlook. All right, with that said, before we get to the forced marriage, before we get to the offensive staff, Greg wants to get to game time.
We all watch the games on TV. That's what we're comfortable doing. But to really enjoy sport, you have to be there in person. And Game Time helps to get you there. It's the way I get there. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals and great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with none of those annoying surprise fees at checkout that you get at other ticket places. They got the seat views on there. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. I was just looking for events coming up at TD Garden. If you've never been to the Bean Pot, they got some great deals on there. Monday night is the semifinals. It's great stuff. You can get in for $60 all in at a few places. They got some great deals. You could sit close to the boards for $156, $145 all in. Got to get there. So make sure, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Oh, it's time. It's time.
It's time.
So
bring it.
Could you imagine my reaction as I was sitting in my living room and transparently, frankly, I don't watch a lot of Felgermaz. I don't listen to a lot of radio, really. I kind of like doing my own stuff and staying in my own head. I don't like being, what's the word I'm looking for? Impacted by somebody else's opinion. And then I'm thinking, I start to think a little bit of that. And so I don't watch a ton. I really don't. But I do watch a decent amount when Greg's on, because I like the back and forth, and Greg's my guy. So I'll watch it. And I was watching this week, and frankly, I was disgusted when my guy Greg all of a sudden went out there with a heat check, with a bomb when he said something along the lines of, "You know what, fellas, I'm starting to feel like this could be a little bit of a forced marriage between Josh McDaniels and Mike Vrabel." We'll get to the offensive staff. I want to keep that separately. As far as the decision to bring McDaniels in as OC, Greg Bedard, do you believe that was a Robert Kraft decision and it was forced on Mike Vrabel? Or do you think inevitably it was a Mike Vrabel decision? Clarify, sir.
It's a good question. How would I answer that? I mean, is it possible to be sort of in the middle? I think it was a combination of Mike not being able to get his preferences, whether it be Arthur Smith or Tommy Rees or other people that we don't know about. And but also I think the Krafts let it be known to Mike that they really like Josh. He's always done a good job for them, and they would really like Mike to give Josh a really hard look. Now, do I think it was, forced on Vrabel, like he had to do it? No, but my feeling and the offensive construction around him is like a lot of this circumstantial evidence for me. So it's not part and parcel. I think that Vrabel, at least for now, decided to go along, to get along, but I think he's leaving some options open.
I don't feel like Mike Vrabel is a get along to go along type guy. I don't see that. I don't hear that. I don't feel that. I don't think we can have it both ways. I don't think we can treat Mike Vrabel as the sergeant, the new marshal in town who walks in and he's going to run the football operation, but then suggest that he was kind of giving one, so to speak, to ownership by letting the guy who's going to run his offense be Josh McDaniels. I don't think that's Vrabel's personality. I also am very confident that Mike Vrabel had all of the leverage, not most of the leverage. He had all of the leverage when he was talking to the Krafts. And he knew that. I knew that. You knew that. We all knew that. I don't think Mike Vrabel makes any decision as far as, a top position on his coaching staff without feeling comfortable and believing that that is the right decision, whether it's his second choice or third choice. I believe that. I would also say that it's interesting, Burt Breer in the middle of December said on Chicago radio, Chicago 1000, that the top two guys that Vrabel had as far as who was going to run his offense, and Burt was talking about the Chicago Bears at that point, would be Tommy Rees or Josh McDaniels. So it's not as if McDaniels came out of left field. It's not as if this wasn't reported out a month before Vrabel got the job. It was stated by Burt, and it was stated also, I believe, by Jeff Howe in early January, maybe even earlier than that Vrabel and McDaniels was possibly a package. And it wasn't just a package to the Patriots. It was a package deal. And it started with Chicago.
We talked about that too.
Right. So this isn't, it's rather obvious to me. And I would also say, I'm not going to get too deep into this because I'm not an insider or whatever. I would say I have a pretty good source with this situation. And that's why I was really confident when Greg and I talked, and I don't think the podcast ever made the light of day because the McDaniels news came out hours later. But we were talking about it on a podcast last week before McDaniels got hired or 2 weeks ago. Is McDaniels going to be the guy? And at the time, Greg said, I wouldn't say he's the favorite, but I would say he's in the mix. And I'm not totally sold that he'll end up being the guy, but he's there. He's up near the top of the list. And I said to Greg, I absolutely believe Josh McDaniels will have that job, and I think he'll have the job within the next 36 to 48 hours. So I do have a little bit of information, and I think this was a situation where Vrabel was looking at McDaniels, and I think McDaniels was on his list, and I think McDaniels was near the top of the list. It might have not been the tippity top, might have been Tommy Rees, as you said, Greg. He might have been hoping that Arthur Smith was going to be able to wiggle his way free somehow, some way. But I don't think this was Mike Vrabel walking into the office. And I'm saying this, I'm not saying you're framing it this way, Greg, but I do think it has been framed in a way where it's Mike Vrabel walks into the office and he's got his list of, offensive coordinator suggestions. And Kraft sits there and he's like, I want McDaniels. Like, I don't think that happened. I would also say, by the way, because I love research, before we get to the staff issues, I'm going to play a game here, Greg, with you. Let's see if you get this right. From 2019 to 2024, there were 30 head coach hires in the NFL. So 30 it's from 21 to 24. That 5-year period, 21, 22, 23, 24, the 4-year period, whatever. 30 hires. How many of those head coaches do you think brought the top coordinator with them on the opposite side of the football? How many do you think had a relationship with that guy? How many do you think? So, for example, Antonio Pierce, I'll give you one. Antonio Pierce in 2024, right? He stayed with the Raiders. Patrick Graham was his defensive coordinator. You can look at the offensive coordinator or whatever. You could look at Shane Steichen in 2023. Offensive guy, brings in Gus Bradley as his defensive coordinator. They had a relationship. Out of the 30 head coaches, how many do you think had a relationship with the guy who's going to run the opposite side of the football?
25.
Oh, no, not that high.
Oh.
No, actually, you're right. You're right. Hold on. No, I'm awful at math. Not that high. 17. 13 out of the 30 head coaches that were brought in had what we would say arranged marriages, had no relationship with the guy who was brought in. That's 43%. So almost a flip of the coin through 4 years of hiring. And I'll give you some examples. Brandon Staley brought in Joe Lombardi.
What's your point?
My point is that arranged marriages are not unique. And I think, and I'm not saying that this was arranged marriage, but if the argument is that this was an arranged marriage, I would tell you they happen all the time. And I think because we're in this bubble of New England, it's painted as Robert Kraft doing something that is not done very often, which is just BS. As a matter of fact, when you look at last year's hiring cycle, Dave Canales, Mayo, Mike McDonald, Brian Callahan, Dan Quinn, all had people on their staff running the opposite side of the football that they had absolutely zero relationship with. So my point is, even if it was arranged, it's not something that's like looked down upon by the NFL. And it's not something that is just, an issue where it's, Robert Kraft is meddling. Not necessarily, if you believe it's arranged. And again, I don't believe it was arranged. I believe McDaniels was Vrabel's call. Now, as far as the staff, what's your problem, Greg?
Okay, so this is the pertinent thing to me. I don't care about Kraft. I don't care about the arranged marriage. Like, that's not it. Like, I don't really care. And by the way, on McDaniels, I could tell you that I know, like, there weren't in-depth discussions with Vrabel and McDaniels very much at all about the future and things like that. And even after, like, even in the immediate aftermath of Vrabel getting the job.
Now talk to your boy Bert. Don't talk to me. Talk to your boy Bert. He's in the middle of this.
And that's fine. To me, the bigger issue that I have what my point was with Felger and Maz was I feel uneasy about what they're doing on offense, as opposed to what Vrabel's doing on defense is exactly what he should be doing. He knows what he wants. He knows what scheme he wants. He's bringing in his people that can execute it. The exact opposite is going on offense. I think the world of Josh McDaniels. And, because of his brilliance and what he's learned over the years, this could end up working like gangbusters. That's probably what's going to happen, because that's how much confidence I have in Josh McDaniels, who I think him and Vrabel are very much aligned in the fact that they both believe in their hearts that coaching on either side of the ball is about knowing what you have, knowing what you don't have, and building everything that you do around that. I think that they are in sync with that. I think they're might be two of the best in the NFL at that. So it gives me a level of confidence that this is going to, no matter what we're talking about right now, that it's going to work at the end of the day, because I think that much of both of these guys. My thing is, like I said, the defensive side, they're doing it right. The offensive side is a complete hodgepodge of people. Like, it's basically like a gumbo stew of, you got Josh McDaniels and where he's been. You got, Doug Marrone where he's been, Thomas Brown where he's been. You have Ben McAdoo into the mix, which makes this me even more uneasy about, what they're doing on the offensive side. I mean, to me, if you were empowering, if you felt the greatest confidence in Josh McDaniels to be the offensive coordinator, you would have given him a few key hires, and maybe he did. We don't know that yet because Vrabel hasn't talked. My understanding is he's going to talk once the staff is completely full. We'll see when that is, what he says, and how things came about. But, especially when you're talking about Josh McDaniels and what he does and what he believes in on offense, to me, offensive line and wide receivers coach, which might happen because it's still open as we've talked about. He needs those guys. And this is not new. We talked about this with Bill O'Brien, the arranged marriage with Adrian Clem, which was a complete disaster. When O'Brien's guy, Mike Devlin, who's now the Chargers offensive line coach, was right there as Jets assistant offensive line coach that they could have brought in. And I bet you things would have worked a lot better. But to me, it looks like, again, this is what it looks like to me. I'm not saying anybody's told me this, but to me, it looks like, okay, hire Josh McDaniels. Now you're throwing all this stuff together. He's getting none of his own hires. And now you're surrounding him now with, before it was 2, now it's 3 different people who have done the job of offensive coordinator in the NFL. And it sort of looks like to me that it's like, okay, yeah, we'll go with Josh. Not sure about this, how it's going to work, but I'm going to leave myself options in case it doesn't work at the end of the day for whatever reason. And so that's where I have most of my issue, that if I was running the ship and say I was on top of Mike Vrabel, but working with Mike Vrabel, I'd be like, dude, this is what you need to do. You want your defense? Go get your people. On offense, do the same thing. If you're going to pick a lane and go that way. And to me, this looks freaking disjointed. It looks like a gumbo. Could work. Could also be a disaster.
I would disagree with disjointed. I think the first question to ask is it better to try to hire the best people you can hire, or is it better to hire people that you know? That seems to be part of the question here, right? Because the people that you know bring familiarity, but they also might have a limit. They might have a ceiling. Somebody like Thomas Brown is known across the league as, a really high potential type guy. So do you bring Thomas Brown in to be your passing game coordinator and tight ends coach, or do you go out there and try to bring in like a Shaplinski or whoever else that you worked with back in the day? I think that's part of the conversation here. I don't have much of an issue of trying to go out and get the best people that you can get. Secondly, I would say, I think categorizing the offensive staff as Vrabel people, I don't know about that. First, Tony Dews, yes. Tony Dews is obviously a Vrabel guy, right? So we can put him there. Doug Marrone has never coached with Vrabel. He is best friends with.
I'm not saying they're Vrabel guys. It's just all over the place. I mean,
right.
Just the fact that Thomas Brown, from what we know, is the pass game coordinator. I mean, like, what the hell? That's Josh McDaniels' specialty. Who needs? He doesn't need a pass game coordinator. He's been doing this for like 20 years.
First of all, it's a title. I'm sure that McDaniels will have plenty of say. They probably had to give Brown that title to get Brown in the building, and they probably really wanted Brown in the building because he's a smart guy. Have you not? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure if I'm wrong. Honestly, I'm just a genuine question. Were you the person who said that Sean McVay was friendly with McDaniels? McDaniels has a great relationship with McVay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I could say Thomas Brown's a McDaniels guy, possibly, right? If we're going to use the relationship of yes, because if we're going to use the relationship that Doug Marrone has with Bill O'Brien and say, oh well, he's best friends with Bill O'Brien, so Mike Vrabel brings in Doug Marrone, I could say, well, hey, Thomas Brown was the assistant head coach of Sean McVay, and they have a bunch of McDaniels guys who used to coach underneath McDaniels out there in LA with the Rams. So McDaniels has to have some working knowledge of Thomas Brown and probably has had conversations about Thomas Brown. So I would imagine, if McDaniels is good friends with McVay and McVay named that guy his assistant head coach, I would just have to make the leap that there's been a conversation between McDaniels and Brown, or at least McDaniels and McVay, about Thomas Brown. That's what I would say. If we're going to use those links, that's what I would do. I would also say that young guy, it looks to me, Greg, what's happening here is McDaniels has his say, Vrabel has his say, and what they're doing is they're meeting in the middle, which I think is what you should do. It's a compromise. I would love to have McDaniels have all of his guys. I don't think that's always the case. I'll get to that in a second across the NFL, especially one recent example. But you look at Marrone again, the link. The two young guys that we know on the staff, you've got Larkin, who is a McDaniels guy, right? John Carroll, that link with John Carroll and all of that. And you've got Ashton Grant, who is a Vrabel guy from the Cleveland Browns. So I think it's almost 1-for-1 versus Vrabel's walking in and swinging his big Vrabel and saying, this is what we're going to do. The other point I would make is this. Did you think the Washington Commanders had a good season?
Yeah.
All right. So what I did was I wanted to find the most recent example that was as close to what we have right now here in New England. And it was Washington. So you have Dan Quinn, former head coach, defensive mind. He brings in Cliff Kingsbury to be his offensive head coach, whatever you want to call him.
Mm-hmm.
They had no connection professionally that I'm aware of. I looked at both their track records. I don't know if Quinn knew Kingsbury at all, if he didn't know him from a hole in the wall. He brought in Kingsbury, right? So I know people will say, well, Nick, that doesn't really prove anything. Well, then I looked at the staff, and I wanted to figure out who on the offensive staff in Washington was linked with Kingsbury and was linked with Quinn. It might shock people, but from my research, Cliff Kingsbury got 2 people on his staff. 2. It was the assistant quarterbacks coach, David Bluff, who was a backup quarterback for Kingsbury in 2022. Was his quarterbacks coach or something in 2022. I wrote that wrong, but he was in Arizona. No, he was a backup quarterback for Kingsbury in Arizona 2022. It was Kingsbury's backup quarterback behind Murray. And the tight ends coach, David, I hope I pronounce his last name correct, Rye, who was a wide receivers coach with Kingsbury in Arizona in 19 and 20. Those were the only 2 guys that Kingsbury got on his staff. That was it. As far as other guys on that staff, they had 2 holdovers, quarterbacks coach Tavita Pritchard and wide receivers coach Bobby Ingram. And then when we talk about having head coaches on your staff or fellow offensive coordinators, interestingly enough, the assistant head coach, pass game coordinator, who you could almost equate to Thomas Brown, was Brian Johnson, who had no connection to either guy and was an offensive coordinator for a couple of years before he moved to Washington. Their run game coordinator and running backs coach was Anthony Lynn, who had never coached with either guy and was a former head coach in the league. So what I look at when I'm looking at this Patriot staff, Greg, my point is I think they're kind of following the Washington blueprint when it comes to head coach, offensive coordinator, and the staff underneath that coordinator. It's go out and get the best guy that's available to us. And then that guy is going to get a few people on the staff. And then we're going to, have a holdover or 2, which is Ben McAdoo. And then we're going to go try to find the most talented people that we can, which is like Doug Marrone could be Anthony Lynn and Thomas Brown could be Brian Johnson. I think that's what they're doing. And I'm not telling you it's going to work, but I don't think it's this. I just think it's been framed. And again, not necessarily by you, Greg, but I think it's been framed as if Vrabel was forced to hire McDaniels and that McDaniels has had absolutely no say on the offensive staff and that this is such a rare situation that we don't see in the NFL. And I would just disagree with all 3 of those things. I would disagree with every single one of those.
Okay, my counterpoint on Washington is that to me it's apples and oranges because of Kingsbury's system, and it's not as dependent on how you scheme up the offensive line. Basically, like Kingsbury, because it's air raid, comes from like that family. Kingsbury's done a great job of he has schemed, at least this year. It's probably going to change next year because now there's so much film and people get caught up. Kingsbury was able to, through his scheme, scheme around the offensive line, which frankly wasn't very good. He made it look a lot better because it's a much simplified blocking scheme. To me, it's different than the Patriots is because the way that the Patriots game plan, basically whether it's McDaniels or Bill O'Brien or whoever or Charlie Weiss, what happens is that they set the game plan and then they hand it over what they wanted to do that week, the concepts, they hand it over to the offensive line coach who draws up all the blocking for all the plays in that game plan that week. Like, I don't think Cliff Kingsbury is the same way. And to me, that's why and this goes back to O'Brien and Adrian Clem, why I disagreed with it. And I turned out to be right, which was like you do things a certain way with this Patriots offense. And that's why, whether it's Josh McDaniels or Bill O'Brien, they always, wherever they coach, they always had their guy on the offensive line, because the offensive coordinator and the offensive line are so linked in what they do. So, I mean, it's a valid point that you bring up, and I don't disagree with it. I just think it's a little different when we're talking about the McDaniels scheme.
One final thing I would say, because I think it's a great back and forth, but I got to run. I got to do a live pod pretty soon here. The one thing I would say is the guys that have coached under Josh McDaniels also have other jobs right now. So we don't know if they will become available. Cole Popovich is still in Houston. He has not been fired by the Texans. He might end up getting the O-line coach job. Sounds like they're going to hire Nick Caley. I would not think it's crazy if they brought Nick Caley in as their OC, that Popovich will stay as his O-line coach because of that link. Brasilio is still in New York. So if you're going to hire somebody away from a team, you've got to give them a title. You've got to give them a promotion. So that's also part of this puzzle that we're not talking about. A lot of the links that Josh has around the league, these guys have jobs. And so, you can't just pluck somebody from an organization because they're your buddy. You've got to have a legitimate title to give to them and say, we are going to promote them. And that's what we're going to utilize to bring them into the organization. So it's not as easy as saying, well, he knows Cole Popovich. Why don't he just go get Cole Popovich as the O-line coach? Because he's contracted with Nick Caserio down in Houston, and he might just stay down there. So there's different layers to all of this. Look, I would just say this. Would it be more familiar if McDaniels had a bunch of people that he yeah, of course. There's more than one way to skin a cat. I don't know if this is going to work, but I do like the idea of get the best OC available, which in my mind was McDaniels. I love that hire. Get the best guy you can get in that top position and surround him with as many smart people as you can. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Good back and forth.
I will say one last point is I will say, you're right. It could work, but to me, like doing what Abraham Lincoln did, building a team of rivals, so to speak, within his cabinet might work in politics, but it doesn't work, that well in football. And like, I don't know where the Commanders came from as far as like, where all those guys came in terms of the offenses that they had worked in. But, that's what I'm more worried about. You're talking about a hodgepodge of people who have worked in vastly different offenses working under Josh McDaniels. And again, it might work, but it's going to take Josh. Maybe he's spending a lot of time doing this right now. He's going to, and this is part of the coordinator's responsibility. The coordinators have to coach the coaches. And so he's going to have to get all these guys on the same page. Again, the bottom line is I have so much confidence in Josh McDaniels and his brilliance that it will work. It just, like I said, the point I made on Felger and Maz was it makes me a bit uneasy to see them take this approach. Just a few key hires from McDaniels. You're right about guys who aren't available. Dave DeGuglielmo, I think, is out there. He was with Josh here. Josh was bringing him to Indy with him. That was a possibility. Again, Vrabel could know about Googe, who is not exactly the easiest guy to get along with, and been like, F no, I'm not hiring that guy. So find somebody else. And maybe that's how they got on Marone, that he's more of like a consensus pick. He has some familiarity with the Patriots. He has some, whatever. But I will say, between all these guys, whether it's Vrabel, McDaniels, Marone, now Ben McAdoo, you're talking about a lot of people with a lot of strong personalities and strong beliefs. I just think it's a very interesting mix that they're putting together. Could be great. Could also be rough.
I have so much more for you, but we don't have a radio show, and I got to cut this thing. Tell the fine people about Notturno, Greg.
Patriots got a new coach. Now it's your turn to get a new furnace. Who knew a new coach would help you score the best deal on new heating system? My friends at Notturno Home Services are making it easy to upgrade your heating without breaking the bank. Get a brand new gas furnace for just $6,295. And here's the kicker: 0% financing for 18 months with zero down. That's as low as $12 a day to stay warm all winter long. And it's freaking freezing, and it doesn't look like it's letting up. And it gets even better. A new furnace means you'll lower your energy bills by up to 15% and have cleaner and healthier air. And guess what? Notturno is throwing in 1 year free filters. That's 4 filters, absolutely free, to keep your system running smooth all year long. I just got my heating system replaced. They were awesome from soup to nuts. I can't say enough about them. But don't wait. This offer ends on February 1st. So you better hurry because that's freaking tomorrow. Visit notturnohome.com/new coach for all the details. That's NOTTURNO home.com/new coach for all the details, or call my friends at Notturno at 508-422-4296 to schedule your free estimate and lock in your best price of the season. Notturno Home Services, where comfort and savings come together. I trust Notturno. So should you.
Check out Bedard, Giardi, BSJ, $50 for the year. Download that PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play 5. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Use that code again, CLNS, for $20 off your first purchase. Download a Gametime today. Hopefully you all enjoyed that back and forth between Greg and I. We'll see what happens over the weekend. Any news, we'll be all over it. We'll talk to you next time. Enjoy your weekend. That's about it. Bye-bye, everybody.